So, what is happiness really? Some spiritual teachings say that nothing can make you happy, and other spiritual teachings say that your real essence is happiness, that life is supposed to feel amazing. We're here for joy, we're here for appreciation. And both of these teachings are absolutely correct. And when we're speaking, we are creating and we are speaking in duality. And so we have to pick one position to sort of come from, to point someone towards what we can't actually talk about. And so, what happens so often is we settle for the idea of being happy. And sometimes we paint this into such a spectacular thing, like an idea of enlightenment and the idea of an enlightened person, someone who is absolutely immune to suffering and all of the things that make us feel bad, who has attained nirvana and perfect bliss. But this essentially is no different from the idea of us being happy in a new car or in a new house, because it's an idea of us being happy and it's settling for the idea rather than realizing that happiness has only ever been felt and only ever lives right now. And so, this is why meditation and going into your direct experience beyond thought is so absolutely key. And there's so many ways that we seek happiness, and spirituality is another like incredible. I've been so so absolutely shocked at the perspectives that I've entertained, thinking that I should know better. I, the one who can have this, the one who can actually obtain happiness, should know better than to go into those perspectives that could possibly jeopardize it. So recently, I became fascinated by expectations. And this is something I started to notice years ago when I first got into mindfulness and started hearing about the word enlightenment for the first time. And I realized this phenomenon of how it seemed to be that I was unconsciously making expectations. I could not actually remember thinking that I expected something to go a certain way. But when the disappointment was triggered somehow, I realized that must have, I had an expectation. And so recently I started pondering this a lot. And I realized that I had this realization while I was running and had a clear head that expectations are not something made in the past of the future, but that expectations are only ever right now. Or I could word that as saying that expectations are never right now. So expectations are they're a great way to start to become conscious of how we believe happiness to be something outside us, and we're settling for an idea of happiness. And I have found spiritual teachings to be painful sometimes when I took them to be about me being this lower self that needed to be the higher self. And of course, there's no two. And it's only ever about feeling better. And feeling better has a double meaning. It both means heightened awareness, and it means letting go of those thoughts that say something is not right, that are actually creating the feeling and the sense that something isn't right. And so these feelings and thoughts can sometimes be the barrier of going into what right now is the only potential and actuality of true happiness, of really, truly experiencing happiness, because we think that we're going to be hit by this very feeling that those thoughts have created. So we create this incredible loop. And again, with the whole spirituality thing, like, it amazes me how caught up I have gotten and how, like, awful sometimes things feel. And I think it helps to explain that, like, spiritual teachings, going back to how they point to different directions. You have some teachings that act as if it's like a wrecking ball, and it's taking out all those old beliefs. It's just demolishing them. And then there's, spiritual teachings that are similar, that are like demolition hammers or sledgehammers. And then you have spiritual teachings that are like the paint rollers and the paint and the artist brushes, that are more about creating. And you have to know by how you feel if you're not up for those kind of teachings that are like the demolition ones, or if you're going into creating too much and sort of you start to seek some sort of like happiness in action and expression, that kind of thing, and aren't like taking enough of a rest, you start to feel really off. And so you start to know like when it's time to just like the neutral of meditation, or to really start to go in and examine things and start to let go of things, or when it's time to sort of like let some new appreciations filter in. And like this week I went grocery shopping, and it's like the interactions with people, it stuns me how, like, I see how I used to interact and think of people in the past, and just how, like, the really being to tap into seeing and being able to see things about myself and immediately forgive them and other people, and just even beyond that, like, it's amazing. It just brings you to tears. And there's a lot, like, it is like over the timeline, over time, the spiritual journey, it feels sort of like seasons, and like winter is the blank canvas that makes it possible for spring to exist. And that's why I love a huge variety of spiritual teachings from Nisargadatta Maharaj, which has some incredibly like bold, amazing wrecking ball kind of teachings, to Abraham Hicks, that's all about like, she goes into teaching people how to manifest actual stuff in their lives. And yet those principles work for aligning your thoughts just towards happiness, which ends up being the lack of something. It's actually the lack of it's that you don't have to do anything to get it or secure it or like, what do you do with that? Nothing.